If you've been following this tiny channel here, you probably expected an update on the adventure game I've been working on for more than a year already. Well, long story short, I stopped that project for now. I actually did receive some great initial feedback from showing the game around, but it also became very clear to me that completing the game would take at least another year, maybe even more. I don't really mind a long-running project, but this adventure is just one story taking place in this world I'm dying to tell more about, so I've started looking for ways to get a game out to players earlier and extend it over time with more and more stories that I can feed into it. Also, I always wanted to write a game that could surprise me even when I'm the developer and author of the stories. And I realized that writing a classic adventure game, it doesn't really work like that. I know the whole story, I know all the answers to the puzzles, so there's no surprise really for me. So even though the project was going pretty well and I had invested all this time and energy already, I was starting to feel I'm losing some of the essentials that got me into developing a narrative game in the first place. So it was a tough decision to make. Eventually I did opt for a radically different approach. The new project, titled Amy's World, because that is what it's still all about, is inspired by deck building card games with an emphasis on narrative that includes procedurally generated quests. And there's still no combat. This game is about exploring the world, learning about its history and solving problems along the way. Most importantly, after publishing the initial concept that resulted from a game jam, I decided to keep the game public from now on. You can play my work in progress in your browser right now. There will be a link in the description. I'm aiming for weekly updates, there have been 2 so far. And I have to say I like that new direction very much. It keeps me focused on the next most important step in improving player experience, and I can freely talk about every aspect of the game because I don't have to hide any part of the story. On the technical side, I have shifted from a 3D game developed with Unreal Engine to a 2D game based on Godot. Which means I'm going to talk mostly about Godot stuff from now on. I'll start with my top 3 Godot findings from the past 2 weeks. Number 1 is tweens. I discovered tweens in Godot. They're great. Use tweens. They provide a really easy way to make your game look more polished, and also animations can be really helpful to guide player attention. Here's an example from my game. If you play a card, it will have an energy cost to the player. I want to make sure that the player really sees that change in the health bar. So there's an animation that guides the player to look upward, and then there's that additional flash on the health bar, finally a color change and fading out of the bar icons. And here's an extra tip for tweening a bool, say the visibility property. If you write it down like this, what's going to happen is that the bool switches in the middle of that time interval. To make the bool change at the end of those 2 seconds, you can write it as an animation with duration 0 and a delay of 2 seconds. Number 2, a quick one. If you want to select an area 2D with the mouse, you probably know that you need to set the input pickable property to true. This isn't enough when your scene is a child of a viewport though. You need to go to the viewport now and set physics object picking on that node as well to let the area receive input. Number 3, this is a tricky one. Global coordinates are not always the same when you're working with controls or with Node2D instances. Here's an example. In my game you can drag and drop from a card, which is a control, onto one of the puzzle pieces over here, which are implemented as regular Node2D trees. Essentially, on releasing the mouse button, every puzzle piece checks its own rect against the coordinates of the mouse pointer to see if it has been hit. It worked fine, but only if the main window wasn't resized, and once you resize the window to say full screen, it just didn't work. As it turns out, the global coordinates coming in with the mouse event in my GUI code here are basically actual screen coordinates. So in a larger window, the value range is larger too. I'm then passing these coordinates to the Node2D, where I'm attempting to convert them back to local coordinates. But on a Node2D, global coordinates don't include the window scaling component, so the resulting local coordinates are all wrong. The fix is easy. You need to remove the screen transform before converting from global to local coordinates. This is actually documented behavior, so you can check out the documentation for the input event mouse global position property. And to generally understand better what is going on with those transforms, look at this page explaining the 2D transform hierarchy. This may be a bit much to grasp in a few minutes. Just keep in mind that passing coordinates between controls and Node2D instances can get you into trouble when your game window resizes. Okay, and that's it for today. See you in the next update.